So we're going to actually do Q&A, additional Q&A for about 20 minutes for the last two presentations, since we had to cut those short for the Q&A section. And then after that, we will have a video presentation, followed by a brief Q&A, and then we'll end with Dr. Perry here.
My name is Malcolm Embleton, and I'm a mediator at our Supreme Court. I listened intently to the presentation given by Mr. Eric Williams, and I keep wondering if there is an absence of conflict, in the sense of whether conflict has been restrained in Trinidad. I've noticed in today's paper where Mr. Pandey has mentioned that there seems to be racism that is increasing in the country, and it may lead to a resolution. So I was wondering if there is in fact a restraint of conflict, and what is being done about the social issues in Trinidad, if anything is done about those issues.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Is it Everton? Emberton. First of all, I'm not a politician. I'm a geoscientist who was involved in politics. I could dance the foxtrot forward or backwards, whichever you want. No, but one of the things I pointed to in culture has to do with individualism versus collectivism. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we are low on that score, according to the Hofstadter study, which is why I use it. And it says that countries that are low in individual collectivism are we conscious. They have relationships. Relationships take priority over tasks. We fulfill obligations to family and the in-group and society. And the penalty for not doing so is loss of face and shame. And in-group, if you just want to say what it is, could be a tribe, it could be a group of people who I think I look like, or I sound like, or whatever. It's the group to which I believe that I belong. And we cannot ignore the historical antecedents that have caused us to be in this part of the world. So the realities of that is that it expresses itself in the underlying culture of the country. And I think what Mr. Pandey is describing would be his, I haven't seen his article, by the way, but based on what you've said, and I heard somebody else speak about it, he is seeking to describe, to point out his fears or concerns as somebody who has observed the society and who has at one time led it, and led it in a way that others who may have an opposing political point of view may view his comments in a particular way. I was one. I was not in the same party that he led. And so I've learned some things about the whole story. But if I step back and say what he's saying, yes, there are issues. They're very serious issues, underlying issues. But the fact that we have not had communal riots speaks to other areas of restraint and maybe other safety valves in the society that have relieved some of those pressures.
Good afternoon. In terms of the, I don't know how strong a correlation there could be between the tendency for one to look out for one's own tribe, group, or whatever, and progress in the overall society. The question I would ask is, how is the scale, if you perhaps made a check of it, how does the scale look in a country like Indonesia? In spite of the fact that Indonesia had all of those communal problems, all those communal riots, Singapore also had its share of, but those societies were able to make strong progress, so that there have to be other forces that are operating that help to mitigate it.
Again, I chose to not use those countries in this study because of the nature of what we were talking about, resources and so on, but you are correct. And leadership is one of them. The first Prime Minister in Singapore was an authoritarian leader, and his society allowed for that. They do indeed have a high power distance relationship, as I understand it. And again, they were able to, in their way, fashion their way forward. But at the end of the day, it was leadership within the context of the country that moved ahead. So everybody's situation is different. And the point we're trying to make is at least recognize, if you recognize that that is indeed a factor, then you can work in that regard. When Dr. Williams and his crew were moving forward with the first indigenous industrial estate, the Point Lisas industrial estate, they were faced with criticisms from the international companies and governments. They were faced with criticisms politically by the opposing political party, which, by the way, was one of the antecedents of the one that Mr. Pandey led at one period in time. They were faced with severe criticism and opposition from the public service. And the story is told of what he did to most of the senior permanent secretaries who opposed the idea of using the oil windfalls to develop Point Lisas. One of them, who I grew up with his sons, explained to me that Dr. Williams put him in orbit. He would go to Tanzania for a meeting, and then he would get a cable to go to Brussels, and then get a cable to go to London, and a cable to go to New York, and then by the time he came home and spent 2 weeks, he was dispatched somewhere else to keep him out of the way. I was given the story of the head of the public service who was put in an attic office looking out of a small window and had to come to work on time and leave exactly on time, and nothing crossed his desk. And he was the head of the public service. 2 other senior permanent secretaries confessed to me subsequently that they did not have the vision that he had at the time, and they opposed it, and now in their latter years came to understand the value of it. It's about leadership. It's about vision, it's about courage, and it's about statesmanship in the face of a bunch of issues. In terms of where the estate is, the estate was built on what was then marginally productive sugarcane lands and swamp. But the area politically has traditionally opposed the party that Dr. Williams led. And therefore the political leaders of the day for that area said, look at what those people are doing to us by taking away our land to do what? Spend our money on some foolishness that we don't know what's going to happen. That played on ethnic as well as political differences. And that as a country, as a people, with all of those issues, we were still able to move forward. Again, speaks to leadership and the resilience of the people and the various safety valves in the system. You here in Guyana have your own issues that you have to deal with, and you have to find your own way forward to deal with those issues and progress as a country.
Taku Moganse, what I want to say is more in a comment than a question. I mean, I've lived all my life in Guyana, and I've been active in the political struggle in the country, so I'm no stranger to our reality. And I will submit here, until we reach as a country to a point where we're prepared to lock up those who be found corrupt, who steal state funds, don't care what measures you put, it's going to mean nothing. The role of civil society, unless it's to reach the point where we have wide consensus, that look, on this whole question of corruption, if we try you and find you guilty, you go straight to the jail. Anything short of that, ain't no work in Guyana.
Name is Dennis Pyle and Mr. Williams. 2 questions. The first is, you raised the issue earlier in terms of the product, your experience while you were in Japan, of a product arriving that was from your country but not of your country. But before you made that comment, you also indicated that in the initial stage, there was some amount of resources that were enabling the government to invest in the industry, which allowed it to have a certain degree of ownership, I suppose, within the sector. In a case where a country is having or would have discovered energy or petrol, as in Guyana's case, where the initial investment or the resource to participate significantly in investment infrastructure is not, or I'm assuming is not available. What would be your recommendation in terms of, for the government in maintaining or being able to extract the best out of whatever contractual arrangement it would enter into as a result of that disadvantage? Second question is, in the case of Trinidad, we would have seen that, or from a theoretical point of view, I should state first, there is always there seems to be a high correlation between resources that are derived from these natural resources in terms of funds and inflation, which in many cases have affected many countries, developing countries particularly, that would have developed their energy sector. And we would have seen in Trinidad's case where inflation is definitely an issue. So even though you have increased resources, as those resources are injected into the economy, we find that though wages and etc., even standard of living so may rise, so too is inflation, which can neutralize or distill the natural effect or the welfare effect that we want to more or less have from those resources. So the question then, we want to be able to know from your experience what you would have done in order to mitigate that factor, that inflationary factor, in terms of how those funds were released into your economy, the absorption capacity in that state.
I tell people sometimes my father was the economist, not me, but I had to learn about some of these effects. In terms of the controls of the molecules, I think very simply, up front, you need to have had the contracts in place that that gave you some measure of decision making in that. I don't want to comment too much on the existing contracts that your country has faced. But let me give a couple of examples, and which may suggest what we had to do in our situation. And I would really leave it up to you to figure out what would work in your situation. To develop the Point Lisas estate, nobody wanted to invest in the gas. The countries, the companies were flaring it, the offshore. In fact, one in particular that was then operating. The government of the day, in negotiating with that company, they were getting nowhere. But because the Petroleum Act said that the Minister of Petroleum at that time, Petroleum and Mines, could, if there was a safety issue, could shut down any facility. So I think it was that either somebody sprained their ankle or broke a leg or something on a platform, and they shut down all. They shut them in and had a safety inspection. And they climbed, they sent the inspectors out and climbed over every part of every platform, checked every nut and bolt. Basically, it was just to take time. And at the end of it all, they declared that the platforms were safe. And at that time, when the company started to try to produce the oil again, several of the wells had sand and other things and they had to now clean out all of the wells. And that brought them back to the negotiating table to say, okay, if you want the gas, come and take it. The government of the day then made the investment to come and get the gas by building their own gas, bringing their own gas platforms, compressors, putting in pipeline, and building an industrial estate to do something with the gas. So that's one. Secondly, in my own time, we wanted to, and there's another one I'll talk about tomorrow on local content, but there was a situation with a production sharing contract where in the language of the PSC, the minister, quote unquote, is the partner of the companies. And it occurred, when I started looking into some of the goings-ons with it, I realized, well, wait a minute, the state company was actually also a partner in that production sharing contract, but the minister, quote unquote, and I knew him very well, is the partner. So the minister then said to the operating committee, if the minister is the partner of, and who decides on what goes on with these molecules, the minister must be at the table. So the minister, aka yours truly, insisted that a team from the ministry become part of the operating committee to understand what was going on with the molecules. So again, I have not had sight of your production sharing contract models, nor the actual model that is in place at this time. But I imagine that if it was designed by competent lawyers, there may be elements of it that your authorities may be able to use that may be in your commercial national interest. Okay? In terms of inflation, because we import, we're heavily import dependent. One element of it is that we import inflation. I think we can't escape that. If there's a baseline of inflation that just comes with being an import dependent country. But with increasing wages and so on, what then developed over time, and it's not perfect, it's sometimes there are significant imbalances in salaries and expectations for cost of living and such. But over time, you have to develop some tolerance for these kinds of fluctuations and understand that you're going to live within a bandwidth. That sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there, but it's within a bandwidth that's livable. And if it gets out of whack, then the shareholders have a recourse every few years or so to cause better management of the resources.
I just want to add one quick thing to the question of how does the government pay for its share of investments. And I would just lay out 4 possible scenarios, not again having looked at the particular PSCs in play here, but you either pay for it in barrels that you would otherwise be allowed to receive under the PSC. You would be granted equity without any additional payment. You would have oil-backed loans, or you would have a sovereign bond to pay for that. So those are 4 ways in which the government itself could pay for its investment in projects.
Okay, my question is, from the experience that you all have had, we really do appreciate it. Everybody in the room, I'm not speaking for everybody in the room, I'm speaking for myself. But what I would like to know is whether or not you all had local lawyers do your negotiations with the international oil companies that came in. And I'm not quite finished. Behind closed doors, it's my opinion that I think that we should have some of our local competent lawyers on the team with international lawyers, because it makes me just freeze when I think about our local people alone negotiating with people like Exxon. I was in the US, I remember Valdez, I remember so many other things about Exxon, and I just know that we do not have the experience. So.
Vicky, I think you can answer part of that, and I'll answer part. Vicky, and I say this because Vicky and I worked very closely advising some other countries in the same way. And we, in that case, became the foreign consultants. I'm not a lawyer, she is, and I'm energy. In Trinidad and Tobago, as here in Guyana and other places, we're very literate people, and yes, we have some very bright people. One of the things that we discovered, though, was that when our negotiators started to win an argument, the opposing side would ask for a break, either a smoking break or coffee break, and yes, a necessary break, adjourn till tomorrow. Then they would reconstitute themselves and call back home, where there would be a room full or sometimes a building full of lawyers, each with a specific specialty in every clause of the contract, and they'd come back to you. We also had a situation where one of our lead negotiators was a very numeric fellow. He liked numbers a lot, and they soon discovered that about him. So they would float some mathematical error in a calculation, and he would, poor fella, get totally diverted, resolving that to determine that the math was wrong. And in the meantime, while he's doing that, they are coming up with a solution back the other way. In one of my slides, I pointed out that there is a reluctance by our developing countries to seek and accept good advice. It is invaluable for you to, you must get good advice of people who are in your corner and who understand your culture. We've both been in a situation where there were co-advisors who, when we started to win the argument, the opposing side called us to a sidebar and apologized to the government, to tell the government that they apologized for their approach because they were assured by the other co-advisors that their approach was the correct approach. So choose your partners wisely, but in fact you must seek good advice.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I'm from an international law firm, but we never go into a market where we don't partner with local lawyers for all of the reasons we've discussed here today. So local lawyers are important to the process, but more importantly, they're necessary to the process. And if as a law firm, your goal isn't to empower and educate the local lawyers, then you're in it for the wrong reason. So our goal when we enter a market is to make sure that the local expertise is here so that we don't have to be, as the industry develops. But certainly, you have to pay for that expertise. And it is true that governments are sometimes unwilling to do that for a number of reasons. One was the question about how do we pay for it? And then the second is, well, we're smart enough to do it ourselves. And when you're negotiating against an international oil company, as Eric said, they may not have a lawyer at the table, and that sometimes puts people at ease and thinking, well, they don't have a lawyer, but their lawyers are back home. They've already received their talking points from their lawyers. They're not coming into that negotiation cold.
As I said when I started off, and I wasn't saying it for any other reason but to be sincere, I'm extremely proud to be here in Guyana. But let me confess, this is the first time I've ever been here, and I've been to literally every major Caribbean island, and that in itself tells a story. It tells a story. And one of the reasons I've never been here is when listening to my Guyanese friends in England and UK who hardly ever come back home. And that in itself tells a story. Yeah? That in itself tells a story. Jamaicans always go back to Jamaica. St. Lucia's always go back to St. Lucia for one reason or the other. I'm going to St. Lucia when I finish here. But most Guyanese friends only go home to bury. Yeah? Or if there's some kind of land dispute, some family drama, and they have to come. And that is something that has to be addressed. And I hope, God willing, with the right decisions, that you will start to turn that around. Because the bare minimum standard has to be that your oil industry is better than your neighbors, Venezuela, which is in a mess, and better than Trinidad and Tobago. That's the minimum standard. Okay? So what I want to talk about today is the preconditions. Because the objective is Every dollar which Guyanese oil industry produces goes to the coffers of the Guyanese government. Every cent. And we know, if we study the oil industry in developing countries, you may earn $1 billion on paper, but your treasury never sees that money. Okay? So what I'm talking about is what are the organizational preconditions? In other words, what must be done to ensure that we get as much of your money back as possible? Vicky made a very interesting point about, you know, my mother used to say, nothing great comes from a small mind. And one of the problems in the Caribbean, we've been trained to have a small mind, is that we don't want to pay for expertise, but we end up paying 10 times, 100 times by the failures that we would follow. Well, wise management know the money you pay now is cheaper than paying later, and I will talk about that. So my presentation is to look at some of these preconditions and to help to give some practical ways forward. My key learning objectives, that is the thing that I want to achieve, are: one, to help develop an appreciation of the importance of quality leadership. Everybody who has spoken today, whether they've said it explicitly or inferred it, are all speaking about leadership. Leadership is the alpha, leadership is the omega, leadership is everything. The role of leadership in nurturing, means developing and resourcing, building resources in an industry. To understand the significant opportunity that oil production gives a developing country, and to develop an appreciation of good governance and the political, administrative and institutional preconditions, well, that's a long sentence. In other words, what you must do in order to maximize your revenue and help foster an appreciation of the medium, long-term economic benefits of the successful management of large-scale economic enterprises. Notice I did not say the oil industry, because the core skills of leadership, the core skills of management, the core skills of developing an effective strategy can be applied to any economic enterprise, of which the oil industry is just one. So I'm thinking about the nation of Guyana beyond the oil industry. The oil industry is just one sector. I want to start off with one universal truth. That is, wherever you happen to be, at any point in human history, in any country, it crosses class and ethnicity, the timeless truth is this: the ability to identify, nurture, and effectively exploit the human, intellectual, cultural, and physical resources of a country or a region is at the root of economic, business, and leadership success. I'll repeat that because it's so important. The ability to identify, nurture, and effectively exploit the human, intellectual, cultural, and physical resources of a country or a region is at the root of economic, business, and leadership success. Guyana is a resource-rich country. Okay? In terms of timber, a whole range of potential resources. And the success of the economy is how you develop all those specific industries, not just one. It's not just oil. You know, as my brother Kennedy showed in his presentation, and the elder from Turkana said, we cannot eat oil. No, you cannot eat oil. And that's important. Oh, God, what happened? What happened there? Oh, Lord, what happened? Yep. Right. What are the opportunities that oil production provides? It provides the opportunity to enter one of the most important industry sectors in the world and the future. In other words, the decisions that you make now have ramifications for children not yet born in Guyana. And that is a serious responsibility. You get it right now, and the government, the ministers will live forever in the history of this country. Yeah, and that's a wonderful place to be. But you mess up, your name will be cursed forever. So the ramifications are serious. It provides the opportunity to develop local content. I'm not going to go into it too deeply, as someone, Eric, will develop on that tomorrow. But when I talk about local content, I mean, it enables you to strategically position your institutions, your educational system, your universities, to produce the types of human resources that you will need in the medium and the long term. Notice I didn't say jobs. I haven't mentioned job creation. I'm talking about creating the necessary expertise that will serve your country in the medium and long term. I'll give you one example of Norway. Norway has some of the best experts in the world in the area of financial investigation, forensic accountancy, and anti-fraud practices. My colleague who I co-wrote my book with is a professor from Norway. That is not a coincidence, because from 1966, when the Norwegians started to, before they even drilled, they took a clear position that we want to have a professional and a corrupt-free industry. They did not want their oil industry to be similar to Saudi Arabia, which at the time was seen as highly corrupt, dirty business. They didn't want that. So from the beginning, they began to speak to universities, to the professional associations, and said, if we are going to go into this direction, what type of skills do we need? They needed financial professionals, they needed legal professionals, and they put the framework in place. So 15 and 20 years later, they're producing some of the best people in the business in the area of financial investigation and fraud investigation, and my colleague Peter Gottschalk is one of them. Oil production provides the opportunity to transform key governmental institutions and agencies and drive a modernization if well managed. And we know, you don't have to read my book, you can go online and do it for nothing, that the majority of the countries in the developing world that have oil are in a mess. And this question, why is Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, the richest piece of real estate in the world, and the majority of people are barefoot and hungry? Why? Because it has not been managed correctly. So it's a big if. And it's asking the leadership of Guyana to do something different. Because the evidence is quite clear what will happen if you follow the same path. It provides an opportunity to address social and economic inequalities and strengthen society. If oil revenue is managed correctly, it helps to erode tribalism. It helps to erode ethnic differences. Remember, one of the greatest sons to come from the Caribbean was Dr. Walter Rodney. And what did he teach us? A poor Indian man is no different than a poor African. You're poor. And it's the elites, as we saw in Trinidad and elsewhere, who play the games. In Africa, who benefits from tribalism? It's not the ordinary person, they're poor. And that's one lesson Dr. Walter Rodney taught us. So oil will either help to heal a nation, or it will fragment that nation and create political and security instability. So this is what the Chinese call a dangerous opportunity. It can go one way or the other. And it can drive regional and economic development and cooperation. For example, the UAE, United Arab Emirates. Their decision making in terms of how they develop their oil industry is done on a regional level. And one of the key decisions they took is that we will use our oil revenue to build infrastructure that will support business and commercial activity. And we will reduce our dependency on oil to the point that Dubai only depends on 5% of Dubai's income comes from oil. Okay? Only 5%. Because the majority of their money was used to pump prime other industries. And it will help to create the environment to attract foreign investment. Again, Dubai. The majority of the private sector in Dubai is run by foreigners. Dubai is the only country in the world where the majority of the population do not come from the country. The entire private sector is run by foreigners. because they use their oil money to create business infrastructure and then invite people to come in. That's where they make their money. Oops. And here is a picture of a wonderful, this is one of the numerous infrastructural projects in Dubai, which I will be going in December to see some colleagues there. Yeah? And these things are there to attract people to come and do business. As I say, Dubai is a place to do business, and that's where they make their money from, not oil. Nurturing a healthy society and investment environment. All wise economic leaders want to create an environment where people want to come to do business. Hence where I started from. This is the first time I've been in Ghana and I've been everywhere. Why? That's a serious question. Yeah? So you have not benefited from my tourist money, but other people have. That's a serious issue. So how do we make the country friendly to investors, but not at the expense of the population? Second universal truth. Corruption is a universal phenomenon. It has no color, it has no class, it has no religion. It differs by degrees, context, and consequences because we are talking about human behavior. It makes no difference if you're Beijing or you're in Harlem. Human beings are human beings, and if the opportunity presents itself, a significant percentage of people will take it. Corrupt behavior is determined by the relative strength or weakness of an institution. If an institution has strong leaders, strong managers, good supervisors, receive good quality education and training on good practice and anti-corruption practice, has good systems, has good mechanisms for monitoring, and has transparent processes and is accountable, then all things being equal, the likelihood of corruption is to be less. If we reverse the scenario, that you have poor, weak leaders, poor managers, people do not receive appropriate education and training, your systems are weak or fundamentally flawed, then we can predict that corruption will become a major issue in the culture and practice of that institution. Corruption in a developing country is more devastating given its widespread impact on society. Let me give a classic example. While corruption to me is an evil, and there is no manner of punishment that I will not inflict on people we catch. In Africa, Nigeria, to give an example, the government gives the Ministry of Health millions to buy health equipment and drugs. The Minister of Health and senior civil servants go to a backstreet country in Europe like Latvia, buys cheap equipment that does not meet the standards, inferior drugs, and what happens? Children and old people die on the operating theatre every day. Universal and timeless truth number 3. Oil is one of the most corrupted resources known to modern humankind. And look at the evidence. If I was to ask you a question, name me one country in the developing world that has a good oil industry and is supported by the population, we'll be here till next year. You'll be here till next year. Outside of the UAE, which could be viewed as a developing part of the world. Mexico, no. Venezuela, no. Nigeria, definitely not. And see, we'll be here for a long time. The story of oil in most developing countries is a sad story, and my colleague Professor Okutu illustrated that quite well. Here is a very, very important point, which the sister over there, whose name I don't know, has a wonderful afro, reminded of the 1970s, sister over there, made a very, very important point, which she spoke about lawyers, local lawyers and international lawyers. One of the reasons why global oil companies are so successful is that they generate revenue like no other, and therefore they can buy the best experts on the planet. Well, the kind of salaries, if you are a top corporate lawyer for ESO, that's serious money. Right? Any area, they can get the best. There's a question that I always ask my police and security students. What happens to senior intelligence officers in MI5 and CIA and the FRG in France when they retire? What did happen? They go to hell, they go to heaven? No. They work for global corporations. Okay? I was a former security intelligence officer. They go and work for corporations. So if you are the head of the African desk, West African desk for MI6, and their job is to know everything that moves on the ground, they know the good guys, the bad guys, who's sleeping with who's corrupt, who's potentially corrupt, who can you turn? They know. That's what they do. They're spies. And then you leave MI6, you go work for BP in Africa. Okay? So when the SO needs a friend who is favorable to their interests, you already know who that person is. Yeah? You know who to invite for a drink and to whisper in their ear. So these companies employ the best of the best. And then you're negotiating with a developing country. Remember, these guys are in Afghanistan. That's over oil. They're in Iraq. They're in Libya. So there's no dirty trick in the planet those guys do not know. And then they come to the Caribbean and get to deal with you. It's like man versus boy. Okay? It's like men versus boys. So they are spending money on expertise, but you have Caribbean leaders who want to spend a few pennies to protect the people's interests, and you're going to pay 100 times, 1,000 times worse, but they're going to take it out your ass. There's a concept which we call the state capture. State capture means when the corporation is so influential that they're basically running your country. They're basically running your country. And Kennedy gave a wonderful example in Tucana, where the government is silent, the people negotiating like the government is company. Where is the government? Or you have, if you study French oil companies, are some of the worst. French oil companies organize coups. Yeah? Anyone heard of the name of Sankara? Thomas Sankara was killed because of the French oil companies. Simple as that. He said he's going to nationalize all the resources. The French said, no, you're not. And who do they use? His best friend. His best friend. Grew up together in the same village. Eat from the same food, same place. Okay? They organize coups, organize assassination, of course. The company will wash his hands. But they know in the regime who they're going to approach to do the dirty work. So when you deal with oil companies, please be careful. You're dealing with some hard-nosed people who operate in some hard-nosed conditions, and you come there with your big Caribbean smile and your naivety. Yeah? You're like a little child, a girl around a sexual predator. Yeah? I'm not joking. Read the books and come back and tell me I'm lying. And when we have leaders who want to spend a few dollars. Yeah, as old people used to say, you're penny wise and pound foolish. Okay. Why tackling corruption is good for business? Corruption deprives the government of much needed revenue. People in the developed world need every penny their government raises. Every penny. Every penny. You know, I remember in the Robin Hood story back in the day, they used to steal 1 penny from the king, they're coming for you. Anybody seen the program, the film called Pirates of the Caribbean? The Pirates of the Caribbean is very simple. The English king is sending his people around the world to get hold of pirates. Why? Because pirates are not paying tax. That's what it's about. The most powerful policing agency in England is Treasury. Yeah? They have more powers than anybody else, because when you withhold tax, it's one of the greatest crimes in the country. Hence, custom officers have more power than the police. They don't need search warrants. They just kick down your door and seize. A police officer cannot do that. But customs can, because it's to do with revenue. And stealing from the king is the worst crime you can commit. Kill your mother first before you steal a penny from the king. Okay? And the Pirates of the Caribbean, that is the backstory. They want, you're stealing stuff, the king wants his cut. And they're chasing the pirates around the world to get the king's cut. That's what it's about. And we need that mentality. If you steal a penny from the people from Ghana, we're coming for you. Simple. We will hunt you down. Corruption creates inequalities and inefficiencies. Now we see that in procurement fraud, when people not qualified for contracts are getting contracts. That means you're getting people who do inferior work, yeah? Which means it's going to cost you more money than get the right people who could do the right job. Corruption increases the price of business, of course, because of duplication. If you get a third-rate carpenter to come and fix your roof, you know 6 months how you're going to spend money again. It's inefficient. And it increases the cost of business. Corruption usually involves criminal activity or unethical activity, one or the other. A short quiz. Can anybody tell me who this man is? Can anybody tell me who this person is? The president of the Caribbean Institute of Forensic Accountants is going to give you an award. He doesn't know that yet, but I just told him so. I'm only joking. Who is this person? Who's this person? Who? Martha Stewart, correct. Okay, correct. Huh? No. And who is this person? Who said that? What do they all have in common? You're correct, my friend. What do they all have in common? They've all been jailed for corruption or financial related activity. And all of them have served time for corruption or insider dealing, which is corrupt practice, every single one of them. And why this is important is this. These are rich, powerful people, but they've all done time in jail. Okay? That tells us something about the country they come from, which is in England, or the US. This is Jeffrey Archer. Jeffrey Archer was the best friend of Margaret Thatcher. He was a minister, and like this, one of our personal friends before politics. But the day he done this, he finished. He's no longer, see, unlike the Caribbean, where certain politicians will associate with criminals, in England, once you're done, finish. You will not get a Christmas card from me. Yeah, I will not come to your child's christening. Yeah, because you cannot be associated with a criminal. Okay? So all these people, powerful people, multi-millionaires, have all gone to prison. Right, here's the question I put to you. Can you name a powerful and wealthy person in the Caribbean who has been sentenced to prison and served the sentence for matters related to fraud or corruption? Stanford. Who? Stanford. Stanford. He got dead in America. Other than America, here I'll tell you, and anybody can name me one person.
In Hindenburg, he got 23 years in Grenada.
Grenada is the exception. Trust me, yes. Grenada, I have found this out a couple of days ago about the amazing work which has been done in Grenada. So I was educated when I come here. Yeah? Grenada is the only place, little Grenada, Spice Island, it's the only place I hear where big people have gone to jail. Would you believe in Nigeria? Nigeria is supposed to be very, very corrupt. India's more corrupt than Nigeria. China's more corrupt than Nigeria, and so is Russia. Nigerians arrest politicians all the time. Thousands of politicians in Jamaica, in Nigeria, thousands of senior civil servants all get jailed in Nigeria. The problem is there's so many of them. Yeah? So as bad as Nigeria is, you go to jail if they catch you. The rule with big boys, unless they lose power. When they lose power, then they're in trouble. But only Grenada. So what does this tell us about the Caribbean law enforcement and the criminal justice system? Sorry, sir? Corrupt. It's either that somehow we are blessed with exceptionally virtuous people in the Caribbean, and I believe most human beings are the same. Your skin color is irrelevant. We're basically the same. We're either blessed or somehow we are very, very weak on this type of crime. And I think most of us in here will concur that we are very weak at tackling this kind of crime. That's why we cannot name the many in the Serious Fraud Office in England have cases, enough work to last them 20 years. Right? So we are serious about arresting these people in the UK. They're very serious. We don't care how big you are, we will come for you. Okay, and if the case takes 8-10 years, we got 8-10 years. We're coming for you. Now, before you withdraw my visa or my license to return to Guyana on my first visit, let me make it very clear. I didn't write this statement. I got it from the newspaper. Well, this is an article that I found which says Guyana, the most corrupt country in the English-speaking Caribbean. I have to say I didn't write it and get my visa pulled. You know, persona non grata, your first and last visit to Guyana. Okay? And it says, it refers to a report by Transparency International and said out of all the English-speaking Caribbean countries, Guyana ranks the bottom. Yep, according to its annual corruption perception index. Now, I don't have time to tell you about the methodology and how the index is comprised. And it doesn't really even matter whether it's true or not. Because perception, if someone thinks you're a thief, you're a thief. Whether the facts they rely on is incorrect. Okay? It's like the famous Bob Marley song, which I love. I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. In other words, don't think because I'm a bad man, I'm a rebel. I did A, I did B and C. It makes no difference. You see? It makes no difference. I'm being scapegoated. Yes, I shot the sheriff. Yes, I didn't like his head. Yeah? But now you want to blame me for the deputy. And no, it's too late. It's too late, it's finished. Yes? Transparency International is a highly regarded international agency. Highly regarded by the UN, highly regarded by the World Bank, highly regarded by the development banks. And if they say that's what you are, that's how they're going to see you. So don't blame me, don't take away my passport, don't take away my visa. I'm just explaining you the process. Here's another article I found. I did not write this article. It says Caribbean nations miffed over the US label of money launderers from AFP News 2017. An article which says the United States have drawn a hit list of the most corrupt countries, and particularly those who facilitate money laundering. Money laundering, as you know, is where money is ascertained from illegal means and is diverted or as we can say washed to give the veneer of legitimacy. What is interesting here is the part which is in yellow, and it's the response of the Secretary General of CARICOM, Mr. Irvin LaRocque. Now let me choose my words very carefully. Mr. LaRocque is offended, he's taken umbrage at the finding and says, I don't think these unilateral blacklistings are helpful or are not helping anybody. He said, there ought to be some discussion and transparency on how these lists are arrived at. Isn't that a great irony or paradox? One of the regions in the world which is less transparent is saying to one of the most transparent countries in the world, hold on, there's a lack of transparency. Now you're pointing your finger at me. How come? How? And here's the irony. They publish the methodology of how they come to this conclusion. So clearly this man doesn't know how to read, or his civil servants are not explaining to him that they actually publish the findings and the methodology. But also this, you don't have to speak to someone in an investigation. In England we have 43 police services, and Her Majesty Inspector of Constabulary carries out biannual inspections. I've been involved in 3 inspections. Out of the 43 police forces, they only meet 8. Those are the top 4 and the worst 4. Because you don't have time or money to go to every 43. So the notion that, oh, you didn't come to speak to me, that's not right, he clearly doesn't understand how this thing works. How they operate is they ask you to send a list of documents, reports, statistics. The box of documents is often that high. Yeah? Then they request documents and you send the documents to them. The documents come to a team of expert people like myself, analysts, and it's overseen by a former chief constable. And they go through all that data, then they write a report. So the notion that, you know, how can you write a report without speaking, just what are you going to tell them? They don't have to speak to you. They can go on the internet. They can look at your reports. They can look at your contracts. They have experts to study you and will come to clear conclusions about the integrity of your systems or not. So I have to say, the CARICOM rep is being disingenuous. Now, very, very quickly, I've always been very critical about the role of the US in the Caribbean affairs. The Caribbean is nobody's backyard other than the people of the Caribbean. However, one of the things that we have to take our hats off to the US, had it not been for the US, the Caribbean corruption would be even worse. Bahamas was one of the most corrupt regions in the world. Gangsters, drug cartels, terrorists, you name them, use the Bahamas and the Bahamian banking system as their bank of choice. If I had time to talk about the history of the Bahamas, you'd be shocked at the level of corruption in the Bahamas. Drug cartels, you know, the Bahamas has 300 islands, and many of those islands were run completely by drug cartels. Bahamians couldn't go there, right? If local people go there, they run them off. So the level of corruption in the Bahamas was atrocious, and until the US literally declared war. They said, if you do not clean up your act, you're going to meet the US head on, because from a national security point of view, no major country is going to be surrounded by neighbors who are corrupt, because it means Al-Qaeda can infiltrate the financial system. It means Chinese, all your enemies could infiltrate those countries and then attack us. They're not going to tolerate that. Today, Bahamas has one of the best sets of practice in the region, but it was forced on them by the US. I was fortunate to interview the commissioner of the Bahamian police, who was one of a dozen leaders who they brought in to change the system. I spent 2 days with him, interviewed him, an outstanding leader who helped to clean up the police and the security services. St. Lucia had a politician called Richard Fredericks, one of the most corrupt people in the Eastern Caribbean. Gangster, gunman, drug runner, you name it. We were lucky he did not become the Prime Minister. John Compton, the Prime Minister, condemned him because John Compton's an old school criminal. Yeah? They just charge you 10 times for an airport. They don't need deal with drugs. You know what I mean? They don't smuggle cars. They don't smuggle weapons. They just build a hospital 20 times over, make you pay for it. That's the old school St. Lucian way. So all the old guard were condemning this guy. The leader of the opposition, everybody know this guy's a criminal. But somehow the St. Lucian police could not put a case together. It was the FBI who dropped a document on the St. Lucian government. Can you imagine it? Your police can't put a case together, but the FBI, blam! His career finished that day. You see? So when I'm saying, even though I'm critical of the US, had it not been for the US, the Caribbean would be much worse. So you can't blame them when they start pointing fingers at you, when historically Caribbean leaders have never been committed to tackle corruption. And when America starts making up noise, you say, why are you picking on them? We never do nothing. Yeah? Okay. I've got 5 minutes, only going to cut off the electricity, I've been told. Okay. Quickly. Basically, how do you improve the standards of government and business administration? I'm going very quickly. First, the types of leaders you choose. It's like the family. The kind of father, the kind of mother you have set the tone for the kids. If your father is a drunkard, a hooligan, then it's not going to set the right tone. So leadership, the types of leadership in your administration, your ministries, you give important work to people who have proven themselves in terms of their technical competence. Not because it's your homeboy, or it's your friend, or you're sleeping with your sister. No. Types of governance mechanisms, the quality of these mechanisms. Types of education, training, and support provided. The policies are effectively monitored. The regulation mechanisms and the resources. There's no use to create a department to monitor and it has no money. You know, that's just puppet show. You're just doing things for the sake of doing it. And clear systems of accountability. Good governance, best professional practice. Yeah, we have to ask a simple question: why are there low levels of corruption in some countries and not in others? What can we learn? What is the relationship between foreign investment and the quality of administration and governance in developing countries? People don't like to do business with crooks, in simple language. It's uncertain. What are the key agencies involved in creating an attractive investment environment? The courts and the police. If your court system is no good, your police service is no good, then you must have some policing mechanism within your various agencies that can regulate that work. So if your police can't do it, your courts can't do it, you must have some kind of security policing mechanism that does that. A final example, which is the anti-corruption strategy which was used in 2012 for the London Olympic Games. Between 2012 and 2016, Britain hosted 4 of the global major international sporting events. Can anyone tell me why? Why did England take on all these? Is it because the English are a sport-loving nation? They love competition. Why? Why did they fight for these contracts? Can anybody tell me quickly? Make money. It has nothing to do with sport. It has nothing to do with sport. It has to do with business. If a country can take on a big project, a multi-billion-pound project, and run that project to the highest standard, do you know how much money they're going to be making over the next 10, 15 years? Okay? So when the government injects 5 or 10 billion in the Olympics, it's because they know they'll make 30 billion. Because they're able to demonstrate their competence. And those games were Olympic, Paralympic Games, Commonwealth Games, Ryder Cup, Rugby World Cup, etc. Because they important economic and market opportunities, and they developed a bipartisan approach. In other words, similar to the oil industry, if you allow major events to become political, then you fail. The reason why England was able to get those events, because regardless of the political differences, patriotism, that we want to show that we are the best, or amongst the best. And patriotism is more important than tribalism. Political tribalism, or any form of tribalism. Yes? So regardless of who was in government, they would all do the best for the Olympic Games. And that's important. In order to police, almost £10 billion of taxpayers' money was spent on the Olympic Games. The government brought in specialists from the Serious Organised Economic Crime Unit, who are experts in financial crime from Scotland Yard, and a special team from Operation Podium. They have a philosophy which is totally correct. The prevention is cheaper than recovery. If somebody escapes with money, say 10 million, you probably spend half of that money, if not double, trying to catch them, and the likelihood of catching them is almost nil. Very, very difficult to catch people who run with large scales of money, because their money is going from country to country to country, and colleagues lawyers are getting money, forensic accountants are getting rich, and the likelihood of getting back that money is nil. So the strategy is to prevent it at source. So if you're talking about oil corruption, prevent it at source. Do not allow people to steal the money, then you're chasing them. And in order to lead that project, they got the best police chief constable in the country. We have 43. They chose the best. Chris Allison, who's the National Security Coordinator. And literally everybody in that hierarchy was handpicked as the best people in the business. God, it sent a clear message that we employ the best, and we will get you one way or the other. A very unique practice. They allocated a handful of specialist officers to the ODA. ODA is the Olympic Delivery Authority. They are responsible for building all the new stadiums and the roads for the Olympic Authority. Yeah? They spent £6.4 billion of taxpayers' money. So that's where they were located. You had a team of anti-corruption specialists, police detectives, all going through contracts. Yes? Checking everything, because if there's going to be big-scale stealing, it will take place at procurement level, at that level. So the point I'm making, if you're thinking about the oil industry or any major industry, you have to identify where the risks are. Yes? Whether it's procurement, whether it's revenue collection, identify them strategically, where is the risk, and they take steps to stop it. They also created a specialist invoice verification team, a team of highly trained specialists who are expert on invoices, because we know false invoicing is a major crime. Yes? Now, if you're not trained to spot a false invoice, you won't know. Within the first week of the establishment of the team, a member of staff spotted a slight mistake in the invoice for £4.5 million. The reason they was able to spot it because they've been trained by specialists to identify false invoices. And they spotted an invoice for £4.5 million within the first month of the team being established. The point I'm making is this, because they're going to cut off electricity any second now. I can feel the energy now. I have to run. The point I'm making is that 4 years after the Olympic Games, after they sent in some of the best auditors in the country, they found not one evidence of an adverse report, not one evidence of a penny missing. And you're talking about the best auditors in the business. In other words, the money the government spent to create a specialist team, within a month, yes, you stopped a false invoice for millions of pounds. And that sent a very clear message. 6 people got arrested, people got demoted, and people got transferred. So it sent a very clear message that we, the government, will set some of our best people to protect the people's money. Because the Olympic Games is the people's money. Yeah? All revenue is the people's money.
Thank you, Perry. That was great presentation. So we're just going to have time for 2 questions, and we'll have 1 response from the panel. 1 response from the panel to each question. Okay.
I'd like to get some clarity on the point that Dr. Stanislaus was making when he early in the presentation was making the point about having the opportunity to develop local content that is train and educate the population, new professional skills required to support industrial, allied industries, etc. And then he said, curiously, he said, but I didn't say jobs. And that was reminiscent of something that was said earlier on, that we have to remember that the oil industry is not an industry that generates, it's not labor intensive, it is capital intensive. So if you could just, if it was the same point you were making, but how then do you say that you have the opportunity to develop local content that is trained and educate the population on new professional skills?
Yes. In my judgment, if we look at the countries that have done very well, they've taken a very broad strategic view. And I use Dubai as a classic example. It was heavily dependent on oil revenue. But their view from the beginning was that Dubai will not be dependent on oil. So they used the money for construction, architecture, engineering, and a whole range of issues. So from very early stage, they're training people for future industries which they are growing. So yes. So when I say jobs, I don't mean jobs here and now. Yeah, so I'm not talking about jobs here and now. I'm talking about from an economic strategic point of view, that in terms of where you're taking the country and preparing your people now for that journey. So that means in some of your employment or unemployment figures, there is no significant change in the short term. But we're talking about the future of a country. So we're thinking about 10, 20 years in that kind of projection. Is that more clear? Thank you.
And I just want to repeat what Eric said earlier. He talked about using the natural resource to create energy and industry in the service sector. So that's along the same lines of what that comment is related to.
Dr. Stanislaus, maybe you need to write a paper on corruption in Guyana. You know, your students, they probably could get about 25 PhDs out of that. But have you actually looked at corruption in Guyana? Why we are so corrupt here? And again, this is a very corrupt place, as I said, right? Corruption is going on as we speak, right now. Gold is being smuggled in the borders every year. We have government people in here who know this. Guyana, according to Article 1 of the Constitution of this country, is an indivisible nation, secular state that is in transition from capitalism to socialism. You have Article 1, you're a socialist state here. You know, we've had a failed socialist project from 1970 to 1985. This is something you should look at. And during that time, from then to now, actually, yes, from 2017 to 2017, you'll find, if you examine it, that we have a very virtually useless public service, underpaid. They're basically not mobilized to do work. And they allow all sorts of wickedness from the petty bourgeoisie to occur. The petty bourgeoisie here in Guyana, if you examine it, is a very corrupting group. As Mr. Collins would have, you know, he would know from his research. There are all sorts of strands of corruption everywhere. It's like an amoeba, cancer, throughout the society. They're probably corrupt people by the poolside right now, outside there. All right? In 1916, we started mining bauxite in this country. Alcoa sent down geologists, and they told the people who live in what is now called Linden that they wanted the land there to plant oranges. And from 1960 to 2017, millions and millions of tons of bauxite have been taken out of this country by various companies, and we have nothing to show for it. In what we call Region 10, there's nothing to show.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Right.
Was your initial question whether or not anyone has studied corruption here in Guyana?
Yeah, if you study this pervasive corruption, in the carpet, this corruption.
Can I respond to your question? Have I studied Guyana as a case study? No. And the reason being, I have so much work, I have enough work to last me 10 years. You are the expert in Guyana, of corruption in Guyana. In the same way, my brother here is the expert in Kenya. So if that study is to be written, you will write it. I will assist you, but you are the expert, not me. Understand that? Yeah?
He's an English barrister and Jersey advocate. He's a senior partner at Baker & Partners, specializing in asset recovery actions, particularly those involving political corruption and the unraveling of offshore structures. So he's going to talk about how structures, legal structures, can be used to hide assets.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Baker. I'm an English lawyer and I'm a Jersey advocate. I want to start by saying thank you to the organisers for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's a great privilege for me to speak to you and to speak alongside so many eminent speakers. This is a great time of opportunity and optimism for Guyana, and I wish all of you the best in this fantastic venture that you're about to undertake. I was really hoping to be in Georgetown with you. I've never been to Georgetown or your wonderful country, but I've heard lots about it because I'm married to a Trinidadian for my sins, so please forgive me. My Trinidadian wife has a Guyanese uncle who speaks very proudly of Guyana and tells my children the most fantastic tales of crocodile hunting in the rivers. He also had the great privilege of opening the bowling for Guyana in the 1960s, and he tells me that his picture is in the Georgetown Cricket Club, and I'd hoped to see it, and I hope to see it one day. So I hope you realise that my heart is with you, even though I'm speaking to you in this disembodied way through a television lens. I said that I'm an English lawyer. That's right, I'm an English barrister. I'm also a Jersey advocate, and that's not New Jersey, obviously, it's Old Jersey, and you may have heard of that jurisdiction as a tax haven. We call it a well-regulated, low-tax area now, but tax haven is probably the word that you have heard. In the course of my career, I have had, I think, what's probably the unique experience of acting for a series of states in asset recovery actions following them falling victim to the most appalling kleptocrats. I've acted for Nigeria, Brazil, Pakistan, and Kenya. So over the years, I have gathered a lot of experience about the problems of tackling political corruption, in particular endemic political corruption. But I hope that I can tell you that if there's the political will to recover assets which are stolen from countries, then it is possible to recover them. And political will, in my experience, is absolutely crucial to everything that I'm going to talk to you about today and tomorrow. And one aspect that I've been asked to speak on is prevention, what you can do to stop offshore services being used to launder the proceeds of corruption. And that too turns on political will, because you can have every policy and procedure that you want. You can pay the most expensive consultants their expensive fees to draft policies. You can instruct economists, accountants, lawyers, investigators, and monitors to keep an eye on the books and the money transfers. But if you don't have in place a culture which will not tolerate corruption, then, to use a cricketing metaphor, you're on a sticky wicket and you may not succeed. The cases that I'm going to talk to you about are all real ones, and I want to give you a sense of what I've learned about the misuse of offshore structures, including companies and trusts, to hide the proceeds of corruption. And I hope that you'll benefit from that. But let me make it plain. Let me repeat my central point. If the will isn't there to stop this, then you're not going to stop it. So with that, I'm going to move to my first slide. And this is a classic example of how, in many ways, culture is all. It's a very simple method of stealing money from an oil-rich company. You open a Jersey bank account. So a corrupt politician opens a Jersey bank account. In fact, it can be a bank account anywhere. It might be Switzerland, New York, Singapore. It doesn't matter. The oil company, because it doesn't care very much about preventing corruption, pays the money into the offshore bank account without any particular queries as to why. You all know that the oil and gas industry produces the most staggering sums of money, and so hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of US dollars can be paid into an offshore bank account in this way. And from the offshore bank account, you can have payments anywhere you want. I've marked these X, Y, Z. That could be to a British Virgin Islands company, a Liberian company, a Panamanian company. It could be to the president's son, daughter, nephew, and niece. It doesn't matter. It's a simple example of how a basic offshore service can be used to steal the most colossal amounts of money. In effect, a country's treasury can be run offshore, or its oil treasury can be run offshore. There will be no record of that bank account in the country which is being the victim of this theft. And so I hope you see what I mean, that if there isn't a culture in the country to make sure it knows where its oil revenues are going, and there isn't a culture with the oil company to make sure it's satisfied where the oil revenues are being paid, then that's a significant problem. And a real feature of this type of theft is that the victim country doesn't have a functioning rule of law. It doesn't really have a functioning democracy because there are no checks and balances on the president or the treasury minister who is controlling where the money goes. So in the first instance, you need to make sure, don't you, that the oil revenues are going into a bank account which you know about and which you have control over, and where you have proper checks, where you can telephone or go and see face to face the officials and saying, what's coming in, what's going out, why is it going out, why is that amount of money going out, why is it costing us $200 million for trucks which should cost us $100 million? And you'll be amazed how many major frauds are uncovered because people ask simple, common sense questions. So I'm going to move on and use a case study which in many ways is positive, but in many ways is hugely depressing. It's positive because a vast amount of money was recovered. It's hugely disappointing because so much money was stolen. And it's a story which some of you, I'm sure, will have heard quite a lot about. And it centers on Nigeria and the former Nigerian dictator, General Abacha. I'm going to move on to my next slide, if I may. There he is. The estimates as to what he stole from Nigeria range north of $2 billion US. He undoubtedly stole more than $2 billion because in the story I'm going to tell you, we've recovered over $2 billion or about that, and there's another $500 million US expected to be returned very shortly. Abacha stole money in a huge variety of ways. But what allowed him to steal this colossal amount of money was the huge revenues which Nigeria had from its oil and gas industry. The central bank was packed full of dollars. There were so many dollars, nobody could really believe it. And Abacha used it to steal money. And a feature that you need, in my view, to consider is this, that the vast oil wealth allows politicians to steal from other areas of the economy. So if you've got billions of US dollars coming into the economy through gas, then you can steal money which is coming in from taxpayers, not necessarily directly connected to gas. So in terms of preventing theft connected to the oil and gas industry, it's not just the oil and gas industry you need to have an eye on. You have to have an eye on your other industries, because the wealth generated in one area of the economy allows theft in another. But let me tell you this tale. To the next slide. Jersey was the centre of money laundering, of Abacha's theft. Money went through very, very many Jersey bank accounts. Many Jersey trust companies and corporate service providers provided companies and trusts through which the money was laundered. And Jersey accepted its international responsibility for the misuse of its financial services, and it opened a criminal investigation. It instructed expert lawyers, and of course by that I mean me, if you'll pardon my humility on that regard. We had the most close liaison with Nigeria, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and the United States, amongst other jurisdictions. And Jersey took a lead role in the international investigation. I can hear you saying, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? So I'm going to try and show you what Jersey did. What were the results? Well, initially 165 million US dollars was returned to Nigeria. That number actually is much higher now. It's closer to $250 million, which has gone back. And the $500 billion I was talking to you about at the beginning of this talk is also about to go back from Jersey with a following wind if things go well. There was liaison between Jersey and the United States about the extradition of a man called Abubakar Bagudu. Again, he's got my surname in the second half of that first name, Baker. He's not related to me. Bagudu was arrested in Texas. My experience, strangely, is that people connected to corrupt politicians often end up in Texas. That's something you'll have to ask some Texans about. And Bagudu ended up in prison in Texas, awaiting extradition to Jersey. He was, in fact, extradited to Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian Attorney General. He was sent back to Nigeria after he'd repaid the $165 billion. And the investigation in Nigeria is ongoing. How ongoing it is, you'll just have to speculate, because I'm going to tell you something else about Mr. Bagudu shortly. He was a highly educated man, educated in the United States, and he was a banker. He was the best friend of President Abacha's eldest boy, Mohamed Abacha, and he opened accounts all over the world for the Abacha family. He was at the center of laundering hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm going to talk to you about one particular aspect of the Abacha theft now. It's called Ajaokuta Steel. It's the subject of my next slide. It's a steel mill in Nigeria. It has never produced a teaspoonful of steel. It's going back to nature. Apparently you can see photos of it on Google and the like, covered in vines retaken by the jungle. It was built a long time ago by a Soviet company, and part of the deal involved the backing of letters of credit. And Nigeria at the time failed to meet its obligations under the letter of credit. This was a long time before President Abacha was dictator of that great country. But Abacha announced that he was going to pay for the letters of credit. Well, why would he do that, you might ask yourself? What was it that struck his conscience and led him to conclude it would be in Nigeria's best interests to pay that old outstanding debt? You listen to the story and let's see how it develops. But Nigeria does not buy back the letters of credit direct. I understand there are members of the cabinet of Guyana president today, and if the finance minister is there, he might think, how am I going to pay for a letter of credit which Guyana owes? Well, he will know much more about this than me. There's accountants in the room and bankers in the room. You'll have much more idea than me. But I rather thought that if a country is going to pay for a letter of credit, it might get in touch with the other central bank, or if it's big enough, get in touch with the other finance minister. That's just my common sense approach. Doubtless, I'm too simple in this regard. But no, in this case, they used two offshore companies to buy back the debt one state to another. Let's look at what happened. This is a diagram on my next slide, headed structure, and you'll see, do you see the two offshore companies, McCosta and Panar Shipping? Why would you have a shipping company involved in a letter of credit buyback? And look, Nigeria pays $500 million to McCosta. That's a British Virgin Islands company. Why is it there, you might ask? McCosta pays $250 million to Panar Shipping. And Panar Shipping pays $200 million to the Soviets. In fact, it's not right. It was the Russians by that stage. The Soviet Union had collapsed. It was a long time after that. I just used Soviets for effect. But the point is, do you notice what's happening? 500, 250, 200. Nigeria has paid, hasn't it? $500 million for something it could have got for $200 million. So $300 million has gone missing. That deal took place in Jersey, and very shishy English commercial lawyers flew from London with the contracts which were needed to do this. And the contracts were signed in a bank in Jersey. The contracts were largely signed by offshore trust and company service persons. So there was a person from Jersey who signed a contract between Nigeria, McCosta and Panar and Russia. You'd think that'd be quite a memorable thing, wouldn't you? When I asked the director of the Jersey Trust Company about this, which all happened one day, he said, I've got no idea. I don't remember that. I wasn't in Jersey at the time. Wasn't my client. And he produced his timesheets to show that he was in Anguilla or somewhere, as I recollect. I asked the other director, was this your client? Are you responsible for this? No idea, I don't remember. So in the end, I spoke to the employee who'd been given a power of attorney to sign the various contracts, and he said, it was the most amazing day of my life. I'll never forget it. They gave me the powers of attorney and they asked me to go to the bank to sign the documents. I went to the bank and there were some Russians there, and they had an ice bucket full of vodka and champagne. All of it was unopened and it was on ice. And then into the room came a Nigerian, and he gave a description of the Nigerian. I don't know whether any of you are Hollywood movie fans, but the description he gave reminded me of Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, an African in full tribal robes, maybe even with the whips that Eddie Murphy was carrying. He didn't really say that. But anyway, he said, yeah, I went into the room and they got me to sign a contract between the Russians, Macosta and Parnar, and then they took me into a side room and I signed the contract between Nigeria and Macosta. And they said to me, whatever you do, don't tell the Russians about this contract. Wow, I wonder why he didn't want the Russians to know that it was 500 million that Macosta were being paid from Nigeria. Maybe the Russians would have wanted a bigger slice if they'd known quite the size of the crime being committed by the Nigerians. But what a story. All true, I promise you, and a classic example of how an offshore structure is used to launder the proceeds of corruption, and in this case, either directly or indirectly, the money coming into the Nigerian treasury, into the Nigerian central bank, as a result of its vast resource wealth. I've told you, it turns out, it's not going to be a surprise to you, that Macosta is the company vehicle of Mohamed Abacha and Bagudu, and they've extracted $250 million from the Nigerian treasury. They paid 500 million for something they could have got for 200 million. That's Ajakuti steel. Another method of theft that Abacha used was called security votes. He would instruct vast amounts of money to be paid out of the Nigerian central bank abroad on the basis of security. It was going overseas for the security of the Nigerian nation. Well, you can guess how much Nigeria saw of this money paid abroad to secure it, whatever that means. But it was just another method of extracting money from the Nigerian treasury. He would claim they were funds for peacekeeping in Africa. He paid $10 million to the Lambeth Conference. The Lambeth Conference, as I imagine lots of you will know, is the meeting of archbishops of the Church of England and the Episcopalian Church from all over the world, which takes place every 10 years or so. Well, how much money do you think actually got to the Lambeth Conference? I can tell you it was a round one. And Treasury records marked security votes, as I've indicated, just allowing millions and millions of dollars to be stolen from Nigeria. No reason for these. Where does it go? Well, in the particular, it went all over the world. Lots of it went to London, lots of it went to Switzerland, and some of it ended up in Jersey, which is what the Jersey authorities investigated. The bank were told that the money represented legitimate oil revenues. References were provided by 2 oil companies, one Swiss, one English, as I recollect, big reputable oil companies. The references were false, and the people who produced the references knew they were false. They just made them up because the Abachas were so powerful in Nigeria. Jersey investigated the circumstances of Ajakuti steel and security votes. Nigeria were remarkably helpful. They were very good. They provided all the evidence which Jersey needed. Witness statements were taken from the oil company executives who had provided the false references, and they admitted that they were untrue. And Mr. Bagudu had given evidence in a related matter in the High Court in London, and the documents which were obtained showed that he lied in the High Court, so those documents were used against him. The criminal investigation, a warrant for Bagudu's arrest was issued in Jersey. Bagudu found in Texas, liaison with the Department of Justice, the world's policeman, the arrest and imprisonment of Mr. Bagudu in Texas. He was charged with money laundering, receiving in Jersey property dishonestly obtained abroad. You may think again remarkable, it's always been an offence to receive property which is obtained by a crime in one country in this country. But we had to all introduce money laundering laws to make that clear. It's a strange old world, isn't it? Fraud on the bank. It's a little ironic that the bank had been misled by the references into opening the account. My point here is that in terms of getting money back, you've got to think outside the box, you've got to think originally, and if you can come up with a respectable charge that a bank had been defrauded, then why not? Extradition proceedings began in Houston. Bagudu began to challenge what was happening all over the world. As I recollect, Bagudu and the Abaches retained Johnny Cochran, the celebrity lawyer who defended O.J. Simpson, but a challenge was started not only in the United States but also in London against the extradition. There was going to be an enormous fight, and the Abaches had all the proceeds of their crimes to fight the case. What happened? Bagudu agreed to repay $165 million to Nigeria. He agreed to return to Nigeria, and the Nigerian president, it was, asked Jersey to ensure he was returned. There you go, irony of ironies. He's now a senator in the Nigerian parliament, and he never signed, never served a day's imprisonment in Nigeria. But overall, I say that's not a bad result. A lot of money back to Nigeria, and it was one of the first sums returned to Nigeria, a sum which is now approaching $2 billion and is expected to top $2.5 billion when a final $500 million is returned, hopefully shortly. What were the reasons for the success? Well, acceptance of international responsibility by Jersey, careful investigation by experts, full and proper international cooperation. Switzerland worked with Jersey, Nigeria worked with Jersey, Liechtenstein worked with Jersey, the United States worked with Jersey to get a result. And a lack of fear of the Abaches. I mean, the Abaches were terrible people. They were effectively gangsters. The Swiss court has held that they are gangsters. They're to be treated alongside mafia and such other criminal organisations. And Jersey looked for solutions, not for problems. It wanted to do the right thing. It had the will to do the right thing. And it was pragmatic, wasn't it? In that example, it got money back to Nigeria. That was a great result. It was prepared to sacrifice a prison sentence in Jersey on Bagudu, which was not the view or the position it took in relation to some others that I'm going to talk about. It was good luck as well. The Abaches did not see this coming. They had no idea that a little jurisdiction, a little offshore tax haven would take this seriously, and they spent their resources worrying about the United Kingdom, worrying about Switzerland to a degree, worrying about the United States. And so they got hit from behind by the Jersey authorities. London, $900 million passed through 15 UK banks, and the sad reality is nothing was done. Very primitive methods of laundering were used, so bank transfers direct from the Nigerian banks to London, not very much to hide what was going on. This wasn't perhaps as sophisticated a time as we have now. 50 million US were placed into English banks in cash. As I've said, substantial transfers from the Nigerian central bank and opening accounts for Abacha's sons without any realization or appreciation of their PEP status. PEP, the buzzword, politically exposed people. The UK authorities have been criticised for acting slowly. The Financial Services Authority was said to have launched the investigation months after the Swiss authorities had frozen accounts. Nobody knows what happened. None of the banks were named and shamed. Switzerland, different. And another message in this field, Switzerland is very good. They have a tremendous law which allows them, if they conclude that if there's evidence to suggest that a criminal organisation is running a government outside its governmental functions, that they can return money to governments. So if Guyana ever finds itself, and hopefully it won't, but if it ever finds itself in the position of being victim of this sort of behaviour, then make sure you get Switzerland on side, because they will help. 19 banks implicated in Switzerland, $900 million in Switzerland. The Swiss banking regulator issued a report which was public, categorising banks that complied with money laundering legislation, banks with shortcomings, and banks with serious omissions. My message: don't necessarily judge people on their reputations, don't necessarily judge countries on their reputations. The biggest money laundering centres on earth are in all likelihood London and New York. You may get some action in London these days, you may get some action in New York these days. They've got the biggest problems. But don't give up if your money goes offshore. I'm going to move on to my next slide, and it's my next case study, and I'm about to show you a photograph of the only man on earth, as I believe it, who served 1 day in prison as a consequence of the Abacha corruption. This is him, Raj Bhojwani. He's an ethnic Indian businessman who lives in Nigeria, or he's so wealthy he in fact flits between jurisdictions in the way that the super wealthy do. And as you'll see, 6 years jail for businessman. Jersey Evening Post, that's our local rag, 26th of June 2011. 26.5 million pounds taken from corrupt businessmen. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Bhojwani. He had the concession to sell some trucks in Nigeria. And those trucks were from the Indian company Tata Trucks. He'd wanted to sell trucks to the Nigerian military for years, but he couldn't, because the Nigerian military's contract was with Mercedes-Benz, and the German trucks went to Nigeria, not the Indian ones that Bhojwani wanted to sell him. Bhojwani had a stroke of luck. That's one way of putting it, because Abacha executed a poet called Ken Saro-Wiwa, and the international community was outraged that Abacha had executed the poet. They were expelled from the Commonwealth, and sanctions were placed on Nigeria by the European Union, and so Mercedes-Benz could not trade with Nigeria. That's what I mean by a stroke of luck for Mr. Bhojwani. And he went to see the Nigerian Treasury Minister personally, which I imagine is what you do when you want to sell trucks to the Nigerian military. And he saw the Nigerian Treasury Minister, and the Treasury Minister said something to him like, "What is it you want, Mr. Bhojwani?" And Bhojwani said, "I want to sell you some trucks." The minister said, "How many trucks do you want to sell and how much would they cost?" And Bhojwani said, "I want to sell you X number of trucks. They'll cost you $75 million US. The Treasury Minister said, "Yes, well, we'd like that number of trucks, but they won't cost us $75 million. They'll cost us $150 million. So it's not how I understood capitalism to work. The buyer is suggesting a higher price than the seller. What on earth could be the reason for that, do you think?" Anyway, Mr. Bhojwani was very happy to do business on these terms. So the contract was signed, trucks for $150 million US. There was, of course, a catch, wasn't there? There was a catch because 75 million of the dollars had to go to 2 coded bank accounts in Switzerland. And those bank accounts were called Kaiser and Soze. Now again, I asked you, are any of you Hollywood fans? Do you remember who Kaiser Soze is? There he is, bottom left-hand corner of the slide. Kevin Spacey in The Usual Suspects is Kaiser Soze. And as I recollect the story, isn't the theme that he's Satan or the devil? So a great joke. And look at this theft. Straight from the Nigerian Central Bank, 150 million US dollars to London banks. No questions asked there. Then $150 million straight to the Jersey account. And from there, $75 million to Kaiser, $75 million to Soze. So, a topic of my talk is prevention. Well, firstly, under Mr. Abacha, under President Abacha, there was no chance of stopping that, was there? Because his culture was one of theft, free theft of the country piggy bank. That's what his culture was. There's nothing that really could have been done. But in an oil-rich environment, this is the sort of issue that you're going to face, or may well face. My story might be completely extreme, it's true and ridiculous, but it is the sort of problem that you're likely to face. But if you've got a contract where you're paying out $150 million, some questions need to be asked, don't they? A Treasury official should have been checking with the truck seller how many trucks were coming. There should have been somebody to independently verify the value of the trucks. All of these are really simple things. You don't need somebody like me telling you this, but often it's the most basic checks which will protect you the best. I'm absolutely committed to finishing this talk in 45 minutes. There is no excuse for a pre-recorded talk to run over, but just bear with me for a moment or two. That deal went through with very few questions. Bojwani remarkably went to the Jersey Bank. He was the biggest customer of that bank, and he told them that he thought the Swiss banking secrecy laws were too lax, and he wanted to know how good and tight the Jersey bank secrecy laws were, and he was given advice by the Jersey Bank. It was very, very unlikely the Jersey authorities would be able to obtain this information. But there was a law called the Investigation of Fraud Law, which is what they would use. That's a great irony because it was the law that was used to reveal this criminality. Bojwani thought he got away with this. But of course, Abacha died, things moved on, there was a regime change, and there was a 2-page spread in the Financial Times about corruption in Nigeria, and in particular under the Abachas. And the journalist named the accounts Kaiser and Soze. Imagine Mr. Bojwani reading his pink Financial Times, drinking his coffee and getting to the word Kaiser and Soze. He probably almost choked on his cornflakes. This was years after he'd been involved in this crime. But he phoned the bank. The bank made a banker's draft for some 45 million US dollars, as I recollect, made out to bearer. So it could be deposited anywhere. Thankfully, things had changed so that no bank would accept a bearer check in that sum. But he took the bearer check back to the bank that had given it to him, and that bank divided the sums up into different sums, paid it into wholly unrelated bank accounts in the name of corporations, and then paid the money out to Dubai, stamping each transfer checked from a money laundering perspective. You might think they were checking that they were money laundering rather than that they weren't. But again, a silly example. But if you have a procedure which leads you to stamp something stamped from a money laundering perspective, if you haven't got a culture which says you've actually got to take it seriously, you can stamp in anything you want and it isn't going to make any difference. Bujwani was interviewed in Jersey. He was told that he should not come into Jersey, or I imagine he was told that. He was told not to come into the British Isles because there was a risk of him being arrested. He flew from Geneva one day on his way to Chicago. He landed at Gatwick Airport in London. He was arrested in Gatwick Airport and he was brought to Jersey. He was tried, convicted and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment, and with a very substantial confiscation order which has been paid in full, and a great proportion of that will be paid back to Nigeria. Well, I hope I've done this in 45 minutes. It's been lovely speaking to you. The interaction has been perfect. The cameraman has been nodding at me. I would like to say I'm available to take questions. I am available to take questions, probably by email, and I'm looking forward very much to talking to you again this morning. You're at a time of great opportunity and great challenge, and I hope from the bottom of my heart that Guyana gets the benefit from this wonderful natural resource, that the education of your people, that the healthcare of your people, and that the general wealth of your people is massively expanded, and that all of you enjoy the benefit of your great good fortune. I shall speak to you tomorrow.
I'll just make a comment. There's probably good news to Mr. Baker, the gentleman, that the money has been stolen again, most likely because they have gotten rid of the central banker in Nigeria who was actually going after the people. So most likely it's been stolen again and we're getting some reward.
There's plenty of work to go around in that sector, unfortunately.
Actually, that raises a point really. A large, just to pick up on that point, a lot of those monies weren't returned directly to the Nigerian government. The Abacha money was returned to the World Bank. It was through an agreement with the bank whereby it would spend a lot of those monies on social development projects in the country. And I think largely out of the concern that you've raised is that there was really no confidence that the money was actually going to get back to the people of Nigeria. So the bank stepped in to try to alleviate that. Which I'll just say, ethically raises some interesting questions, right? You know, there's certainly a question there as to whether that's the right result. You know, it is the patrimony of the Nigerian people, and to say, well, we don't really trust you, and we're going to give it to the bank, which has a whole other set of its own problems, is fairly controversial.
But of course, the man is near Senator again.
Well, yeah, of course, and has immunity as a senator.
Is there another question? If not, I'll actually raise one to Stefan directly. He used the case example of the basically misinvoicing for the Nigerian company to the other two companies to skim off the money. And the report that I mentioned earlier, the Global Financial Integrity Report, actually says that 87% of the illicit financial flows are through this type of mechanism, the misinvoicing. So upcharging and getting money off the top, or undercharging and taking money. So can you talk a little bit about how you combat that type of thing?
Well, what happens is that governments, especially in third world countries, say they have systems. The systems are that you must have a contract, a PO needs to be done, and so forth. What happens is that the auditors, the internal auditors are led to just audit the invoices coming in. But the real, or the most important part of the audit function should be on the budget, not the actual. What most auditors do is budget minus actual equals variance. But remember, if I bump up the budget, then I pay the excess, which is the actual, then you don't have much variance. Right? So the internal audit process and that format that they use needs to change. You need to actually focus on the budget part. So they bump up, because when the budget is passed, it leads to a contract. The contract then leads to a purchase order. So therefore, when the invoices come in, the accountant or the accounts payable staff will not pick up that is actually over. They are actually seeing money in the vote. Or the public sector says vote, right? In the vote, and they'll automatically pay the invoice. So the internal audit function is focused on the wrong aspect of the payment line.
During the presentation, it was mentioned that there has to be structures in place to ensure that key personnel and politicians and so on do not fall prey to the schemes of these offshore skimming activities. In your experience, especially in Trinidad and possibly in other countries or producing countries, what are some of the structures that you have seen that have been effective in helping to prevent the infiltration of these guys in the political sphere?
Well, if you use Trinidad, I can't really see, but that's not true. Again, it all comes back to the culture and also to the audit function within the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance. The energy sector has something called independent assessments of contracts and so on. If you just have auditors who are just ACC, ACPA, and they're not trained in oil and gas, then you are asked them to go after terminologies and contract language that they do not even understand. So for example, an accountant is not necessarily an oil and gas accountant. If you're an accountant and you go in the oil and gas sector, you need to learn oil and gas accounting. So if you don't even have your people trained even in that, then how you expect the normal auditors to go after oil and gas terminology and language? Because you'll be auditing invoices of things that they can't even pronounce. Right? Or equipment they can't even pronounce, things that are not run of the day or everyday things that they see. Calculations that are not in the norm. And then when they ask a question, all somebody has to do is give them an explanation that makes no sense, but it sounds good.
Thanks. I guess my first response is wearing my hat today, which is as counsel to private equity that funds litigation and investigation to recover assets stolen through fraud. I don't look at many systems that work, right? So the systems we look at now are the ones that don't work because the bad guys have made off with a lot of money through procurement fraud or other kinds of corruption. Wearing a previous hat in an earlier incarnation of my professional life as running a construction project in Tanzania. Now this is a donor-funded project. It was a US government-funded project, and I'll describe a system that worked quite well. Now, because it was a US government-funded project, all of the procurement responsibilities, while provided to a local entity in Tanzania, this is where it was, the local entity, the local government agency handled all of the procurement, right? But at the same time, an independent consulting engineer with very deep understanding and knowledge of the issues, the way Stefan has described, is involved in that process almost from an oversight role, and continues to be involved in that throughout the contract, the implementation of the various contracts. In this case, it was infrastructure. So you've got a third-party, independent set of eyes throughout the tender review process that prepares the tender, reviews the tender, takes decisions, but it's not the independent engineer that does the decision, that takes the decisions. It is the government agency, but always with oversight. And I know of at least 2 instances, through speaking with the government representatives who were involved in the process, where individuals were taken off the tender board for improprieties. And essentially lost what was a fairly lucrative position because now they're working on a US government project, then they weren't. So that's one way of doing it. I'm sure there are others, but generally that comported with international practice in terms of how to eliminate the opportunities for corruption in a procurement process.
Zelina has over 24 years of diverse experience in accounting, auditing, and operations with multiple companies in the US, Canada, Trinidad, Jamaica, and Guyana. She is the founder and managing partner of zCloud LLC. As a solution provider partner, zCloud is an authorized reseller of NetSuite licenses and implementation and support services. And she will talk to us about how technology is going to be used to mitigate corruption.
In April 2016, there was an article issued by the World Economic Forum discussing how key technologies can help to fight corruption. They focused on how governments, organizations, and citizens are in a new state of experimentation, innovation, and adaptation in order to keep up with advances in technologies. They mentioned that technologies that provide access to information and transparency were identified as some of the key tools in the fight against corruption, which can lead to openness and a level playing field for both governments and market, and has potentials to tackle major issues in society. It's really important for me to clarify what I mean by mitigating corruption, and not to imply eradicating corruption. Mitigation means to lessen the severity of the impact of corruption by choosing the right technology, as opposed to eradicating corruption, which means put an end to. With that said, I think we would all like to eradicate corruption, but we need to start by mitigating it. You've heard the word corruption all day. There are 2 words that comes to mind: dishonesty by people in power. And that's what we need to remember. More importantly, I think understanding that corruption is an outcome, a consequence of the failure of accountability relationships in the governance system. It's an outcome, I think, out of the entire presentation. I want you to remember that. When we talk about technology, in the 1970s, the internet has changed the way we do business today. Information technology has transformed the way companies conduct business, allowing businesses to automate manual operations and process information much faster. It has created new communications and other business methods that companies use when processing financial and business information. I looked around today and I saw everybody had a cell phone, or most people were on computers and working. So we're in that age of technology, but I don't think we're as matured as the other countries, but we're going to get there. The idea is to select a secure solution so that stakeholders in the business can develop institutional trust, a key word. The word stakeholder, it's different from shareholders, but the word stakeholder means any person or organization with an interest in the business. That's all of us in this room. Someone who can contribute to the company's growth and success or benefit from its success. The various stakeholders in a business have differing roles and in their level of involvement, and it can vary from full-time to barely involved at all. It's important that companies design their corporate strategies considering the interest of all stakeholders. Now, stakeholders can have some level of influence in corporate decision-making regarding operational, managerial, as well as strategic issues. The power granted to stakeholders varies from non-participation to co-decision-making and must align with the elements of corporate governance. I think you've heard that word across today. By definition, I think, again, this is a second statement. When we hear the word good governance, what does it mean? And it's a term used to describe how public institutions conduct public affairs and manage public resources. Corporate governance typically addresses measures to manage and reduce financial and operational risk by building integrity, transparency, and accountability. But why is that important? Why is corporate governance important? It promotes confidence among stakeholders. Good governance also promotes an environment of ethical behavior. I'm going to quickly go through a couple of things, and I like to call it the elevator pitch, remembering what these words mean, because there are four of the words that I chose. Accountability is the fundamental requirement of good governance. It's an obligation to report, explain, and be answerable for the consequences of decisions it has made on behalf of the community. It is a duty to record accurately all business transactions to avoid fictitious entries and off-the-book accounts, ensure sound internal controls, safeguard custody of assets, and employ proper accounting principles. That leads us right into transparency. We heard this word all day again today. Transparency is a condition of freedom of information, participation and accountability in the sense of open communication between stakeholders. Transparency requires electronic access, and I focus on electronic access, to all data related to content and processes. Otherwise, transparency is in fact not realistic. To be transparent, we need to also be efficient. Even in the most structured organization, many workplaces, processes are chaotic and disorganized. There's incomplete or outdated documentation, duplication of effort, different people carrying out processes in a slightly different way, or the same employee does something slightly different each time. These result more often because of paper-based silo systems that causes inefficiencies and lack of responsiveness and promotes an environment for corruption. When we talk about responsiveness, we are talking about an operationally responsive business process or IT solution that reacts quickly and effectively to a wide range of business events as they occur. It is also one that is managed in such a way to be rapidly and effectively evolved as the business grows and in response to changes in the business environment. Accountability with efficient and responsive processes leads to transparency, which is the foundation of corporate governance. Why did I go through all of those definitions? This is leading right into a technology that we're going to talk about that we're hoping that will mitigate corruption and help to handle some of those issues that we heard all day today. What you're looking at here is an integrated business management system. The cloud has enabled functionalities that once was unimaginable. Legacy on-premise solutions were built based on core functionalities, such as accounting were done in QuickBooks, and it was predominantly accounting functions, or payroll was done in a payroll software, inventory was done in an inventory software, resulting in companies having to acquire multiple systems to manage the operations of the day-to-day business. This created a challenge of having real-time information available and often hindered effective decision-making. So most of the time, when a company starts, the first thing they acquire is an accounting package because they say, let's get QuickBooks because we want to be able to account for our finances. And then as they continued it, they start identifying what are the solutions they need. We need a payroll system. We need a CRM, which is a customer relationship management, or we need to find different tools based on the nature of our business. The mistake there in most cases is that the thought process of the solutions that we need were not taken holistically. So you find that you've identified solutions across the board, and then as you grow larger and you scale, you find that they don't talk to each other, which is the #1 reason for corruption as well, because you can't get real-time information. As a result of these multiple applications, the IT department also wastes a lot of time and money on integrating, maintaining, and acquiring new versions of each of them. One software or purchase, a lot of integration and maintenance is required for different software to work together, versus an integrated solution that doesn't require that. I'm not going to go in because of time, I'm actually going to cut some of the references I'm going to make, but the definitions of ERP, CRM, and e-commerce are up there. And in short, a lot of us manage customers in our Outlook. So we have salespeople or employees, and we communicate in Outlook. And so, for example, if one person is out of the office, it's very difficult to find that email or know what conversation has happened. A CRM tool is essential because it integrates directly with the financial aspect. And it also removes the dependency of having to rely on that one person, whether they're in the office or not in the office. And I think that two of the areas that I want to highlight on the CRM is the aspect of managing clients and customers and having that electronic access. So a phone call was made for someone, it was documented in that system and it can be accessed. It is not sitting in somebody's desktop in another city, another state, another local, another Essequibo or Demerara. The financial aspect with an ERP, it's very different from an accounting package, in that an accounting generally has your accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger, while an ERP has a lot more functionalities. And like I said, I don't have the time to go through this, but I want to understand that in what you're having an integrated business solution that should be considered at large-scale organizations and enterprises is the ability to have real-time information. I'm going to go through about three more features of softwares that's really important to help to mitigate corruption. And we talk about dashboards. And I make reference to real-time interactive dashboards because with real-time I'm talking about information available in the cloud that you can pull up on your phone as you sit here that's being processed any part of the world and not waiting for information. And dashboards have become a staple in organizations because it gets a clear view of what's happening in the business instead of having to wait. What's the financial? More often, companies are relying on these dashboards to make sense of data. There's so much data that's being captured today, but it's not being analyzed. And you need to have a system that captures every data in that business so you can understand. Because data means nothing if you cannot analyze and make sense of it. It is important to note, however, that having multiple data sources hinders effective dashboard. Going back to the silo systems, if you have 4 or 5 different systems in your business, they can't talk to each other. And even if they're integrated to that extent, they may not be able to pull all of the information. And so it's important that to get effective dashboard that you have one single data repository for all of your information. In the past one, it was something like I said, specialization into accounting or inventory. You don't have to worry about that now because every aspect of the business, think about it, name it, can be managed in that solution. Everybody has used the Google search. And I don't think anybody can raise their hand and says they don't like using Google search or that's not where the first place they go to. In most softwares, it's very difficult to find information. So you may have information that is sitting somewhere, but you can't find it easily because you may want invoices and you have to go to finance. You may want to have a contract and you have to go to sales. You may want a legal document and you have to go to the legal team. One of the things about an integrated business solution is having the ability to find information. And a global search is one that is identical to the Google search in that what you do is you type anything that relates to the business that has been captured. The data has to be captured in order for you to find it electronically. It is very simple and easy to use. And the example I have here is you've got thousands of customers and you suddenly want to find a customer that's called James. You type James' names inside there. You want a purchase order that was issued to a company and you don't remember the name of the company, but you know the number. You can put it in. Very quickly, I'll tell you that if you ever call customer service and they say, can I get your name, your telephone number, your social, your ID, this is how they find it, very, very quickly. So regardless of what aspect of the business, then leading on, going on forward of finding actual data, we talked about invoices and contracts, they all link all the way down. Capture the information, one single place, and you can report on it, and you can find it. This one is for me as an accountant, as an auditor, I love this, and this is the audit trail. This may be too much transparency, but we're looking for transparency. And this is where systems have the ability to track every single keystroke made by a user. And at this stage here, the example here, and I'm sorry about the color, I think the light's a little bit too bright to see that. But what this does is every user, when they log into that system, it is logged by your name and your time. And if you change something, the old value is retained and the new value is there as well. So it's a completely transparent system for every single thing you do inside. And as an auditor, like I said, I love that, and it decreases the cost of auditors coming to look for documents as well, because we give them read-only access and say go in. And they can literally see and follow the trail from the very beginning to the end. It's a very, very important feature. This was the procure-to-pay process, and the only thing I'm going to say here, because we talk all day today again, the procurement aspect has been the area with the biggest risk. The revenue coming in, in my opinion, is not as important as it going out. We know it's coming in, but accounting for it and how it's being spent is important. Having a software that helps you to do that, just the same as finding. And the important part here is having workflow that is automated based on the policies you have in your company. Somebody's authorized to issue a purchase order of $1 million, and then it goes to a second and a third and a fourth. So workflow automation. One thing I like here, with the cloud, it brings two things. Vendors, you allow your vendors to have access to the system rather than having to call you in. And it also allows them to provide electronic access whereby every bill they upload in the system, and it has to match the purchase order that was issued and approved in the system. So there's always going to be a risk for corruption, but you're reducing that there when we talked about matching stuff together. Because they can't change that number unless it is approved, and there's a lot of restrictions. I'm not going to go into that. But a strong procurement system can help to alleviate some of these risks by streamlining and improving the accuracy of the procure-to-pay process. Okay, so this one here, the slide we were going to talk about here, was having information that you can, without having to go somewhere else. So for example, you have financial statements that you have to wait on because of batch processing or results of any aspect of the operations. This system allows you, all of those who have used QuickBooks, we call most of these systems QuickBooks on steroids, because it allows you to do a lot more. But the key part of it, here, you get a number that says we spent $20 million, and you have to go back to someone to ask, what is that $20 million? The difference here is you click on the number, it takes you to everything. Then it takes you down to the transactions, all the way down to the very first thing that originated. And if you have a purchase order that has 25 invoices and 60 receipts and 5 checks, all of them are linked together. So you have a lot of functionality around that. The only reason I added these slides was quickly because a lot of times I get questions around cloud and the security of cloud. And what I want to do is to do two things. What is the cloud and where is the cloud? The cloud is the internet. And where is the cloud? The cloud actually is a physical warehouse that sits somewhere and stores your information by a cloud vendor instead of you doing it. And it is the most recommended way now, because instead of you going to set up, bring talent and set up in-house data warehouse and having to learn all of those, you're benefiting from having an outsourced vendor. And I think that's the two main questions I get when I present on this. The terminologies to the side are the different models. Information as a service, subscription as a service, we'll pass all of that. I actually like this slide. Take just a couple of seconds and look at this. This actually explains the cloud model as understanding how you come from a traditional IT where you own everything, to outsourcing versus you're actually like renting or leasing. And I like the car comparison of the car owned, the car lease, the car hired and taxi, because you see where your responsibility as owning a vehicle or renting it changes. That's the simplest way of understanding the cloud and all of the questions around it. Actually, this one, I was going to just touch like on security. It's really, really important. There's a lot of cloud providers out there. It's really important that as you select them, that you make sure you look at the certifications. The redundancies, so looked at the Sarbanes-Oxley, look at the, all of the different ones listed there. It's difficult when you're rushing through, so I apologize for that. This was an interesting slide that I thought I'd leave on here. I used this at a previous presentation when I talked about disruption. And when I talked about disruption, we were talking about industries like the taxi service and the hotel industry that was disrupted by Uber. Uber disrupted the transportation industry. Facebook. What is the one thing that's common inside of here? All of these companies are global, but they're managing their business on one common. They're all in the cloud, and they're not managing one company. And they have grown quickly and disrupted industries that has been here for a long, long time. All right? I think that's my last slide. I did really, really well. This is, stop me and you can email me, but this was I was passing through the airport. And we're going to find that strategy. There are going to be so much strategy meetings, and you can have as much strategy meetings as you want. If you don't have the right technology to take that through, then it's not going to be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Selena. That was great. And for those who are trying to figure out, well, how does that impact me? For one, if you're planning on taking part in this sector or more broadly as industry develops here in Guyana, then you will be expected to comply with some of the security requirements and the transparency requirements that she talked about. So that's how it matters and why it matters to you. So this was a perfect way to end the day. We started off the day with the goal of discussing how conditions allow public corruption to flourish. We started with Afro Raymond, who talked about public procurement. And then we heard him highlight specifically the importance of leadership, policy, and transparency. And then with Professor Makutu talking about how when the failure to develop policy with the help of government, private sector, and CSOs doesn't happen, you have situations such as that in Turkana in Kenya. And then we followed that over with presentations from Eric Williams and Stephen Baker, also giving us case studies and what happens when these three elements, the leadership, policy, and transparency, are not there.